Hi, physics class. Welcome to your introduction to your Rube Goldberg project. You will find complete instructions on your GradeLink page, but I just wanted to be able to show you some physical examples of the simple machines that you'd be needing to include in your Rube Goldberg machine. You also have to figure out a purpose for your machine. You can change your purpose as you go through. You will find that on various different days throughout this project there will be times when you need to fill out some how you're doing type of forms on those Google Docs. So please make sure that you keep up with that. It is part of your grade. However, the Rube Goldberg project is its own thing. It also counts in 3 categories. As you'll see when you go to the assignment on GradeLink that says Rube Goldberg machine, it's all laid out there as far as the criteria. There are 2 documents on there. One is the rubric that I'm going to use for grading it, and then the other is actually a little bit better as far as the instructions. Now, on this machine that you need to create, you have to have it accomplish a purpose. A Rube Goldberg machine is nothing more than something that's complicated that does a simple task. So what you need to do is incorporate at least 4 of those 6 simple machines. Now, the thing that you have to keep in mind is that the output work from one always has to become the input work of something else. So it's moving on and on and on. The other 2 things that you need to include in it are some kind of elastic potential energy and some kind of gravitational potential energy. So I have some things set here that can help us to be able to figure out these different things. Elastic potential energy could be something, something that stretches and releases, but somehow there has to be an energy transfer when you're using your elastic potential energy. We also have the idea of a pulley. It can be as simple as something where you've got some kind of rod and you've got something pulled on top of it, and then one side pulls the other and it comes down. That will be a great example of a pulley, and it can be anything that you find around your house. It can be a toilet paper roll, whatever it is that you loop something over and you pull one thing to the other. Another thing that you need to be able to include in here would be some kind of an inclined plane. Inclined planes are easy, and usually you find those a lot in these type of things. An inclined plane is just a ramp. So somewhere along there you can have a ramp, you can have something rolling down the ramp along those lines. And keep in mind that this thing also that I'm showing as a demonstration shows an example of gravitational potential energy turning into kinetic energy, which you also need to include in there. So I've had that. A lot of times people have trouble figuring out how to implement a wedge. Well, a wedge, if you look really closely on these scissors, okay, every pair of scissors or any knife, if you look closely enough, has a wedge. Remember, a wedge is a movable inclined plane. So we have that from our time when you were supposed to be watching and learning how to change a tire. I have here a wedge. Now this wedge, if you remember from that video, they didn't have that on the video, but the other thing that I had told you, that it's important that if you're changing your tire, if you have a flat tire on the rear, then you need to put this in front of the front tires. Here's another example of how a wedge can be used. It's a movable inclined plane. So this wedge can be used to push something up, which actually could be part of your procedure for your Rube Goldberg machine. So you have that. Now your trick is that you've got to have one feeding into the other, into the other, into the other. Another one that is interesting to think about is a screw. Now this is my car jack from my car, and if you'll notice, this part right in here is a screw. And when I turn the one end of it, if I turn this piece, that actually in effect brings the car jack part up, okay? And if you were looking in your trunk and trying to figure out, like I said, you'll find something that turns, and what's that's doing is that's turning the screw. And I want you to see what's happening there is that as the screw turns, you'll see that this part sticking out is getting a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And so the effect of that is that it is being used towards moving this piece up. There's actually a few things happening with this. You've got a screw, but then you've also got some other pieces that go together to make this work so that it's lifting up your car. So this is an example of what a screw would look like. Now, if you do incorporate a screw into your machine, you have to make sure that that screw is actually doing something towards the movement of towards the movement. You can't just use a screw in order to hold something together and say I included a screw. It's got to be something else with that. So this screw is actually being used to move a couple levers, which is being used to move something else. So the problem with this one is that I have to be continually turning it, and so that makes it a bit of a challenge. So it might be good to use as something that starts a machine, because one of the other criteria that you'll notice is that you have to make sure that you are only putting your input, you're only starting it in one place. You're not actually pushing along as it goes. So you just have to be a little bit careful to make sure that you're following all of those directions. Yes, my dog is barking. He likes things going on, but I don't have a way to really stop this. So we're going to just continue with these things. So here I have the same dowel rod that I had before, but as I pull this one, I'm using it more as a wheel and axle than I am as using it as a, I'm not using it as a pulley this time. I'm using it as a wheel and axle. Or if I turn this and it's wrapping this around and around and around, that is the idea of a wheel and axle. Now, I am not saying that you have to use any of these specific examples that I gave in your work, but what I'm saying is that there are things around your house that you may not necessarily even think about that would be useful for these things. You can look at the different examples, the Rube Goldberg examples that we have, but you have to design this and implement this in your own space. So you'll be taking a video of it, making sure that you get it postable somewhere, whether it be on YouTube or somewhere. You can make it either public or you can make it by shareable link only. That's fine, but you have to have some way to share it with the class. And then that'll be up to you as far as how you want to share it. There also may be some times when I ask you to send me a short clip by an email to see how you're doing with these things, because it's important that you're not waiting until the last minute to be able to do this, which the last minute would be midnight on Thursday, May 7th. That's your final due date on that. And then the following day, we're going to make sure that we have a watch party. I think that's Friday. Make sure that you double check that date on that. But it is a Thursday in the beginning of May that is your due date on this project. All right, so that's about it. Just make sure that you look at the directions. Make sure that you follow them. Make sure you're turning in your progress reports, because that's super important. I've built in 4 complete total where you're doing nothing in physics class besides working on that. So that gives you 3 hours worth of time, plus that whatever time you have left to work on it today, which would be another half hour at least, where you can start brainstorming, start gathering some things up. But it is your responsibility to make sure that you get that done and get it submitted by the due date that is listed on GradeLink, and then we'll have a watch party the following day. It does count as part of your Chapter 11 test. It counts as a lab grade. It counts as homework, classwork. So it hits all the categories because you're doing all the things. All right, so go find some things, do a little brainstorming, see how one thing goes into another thing, and I hope you have a lot of fun doing this as well. It's not meant to be a drudge or something that you hate doing. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. And with that, go create a Rube Goldberg machine.